Well, hello there, you amazing, wonderful YouTubers. Thank you so much for showing up for another one of these. What's wrong with you? Why do you keep doing this to yourself? Welcome to my channel. I'm going to do a short, I always say that. I'm not trying to lie to you. I really do intend, because I've got a Patreon thing I got to roll and do in a little bit. So that will make sure that this is a short video. Maybe, I don't know. Welcome to the channel. I thought what I might do is do some videos on world building. I've gotten some emails and some questions about that, how I kind of go about it, and maybe those would be helpful to you, the studio audience, maybe. So world building. One of the things I kind of wanted to talk about is everybody does this a different way. Paul Anderson, who is sort of like this science fiction giant. He wrote a lot of science fiction in the golden age, and did a series called the Polysotechnic. Oh my God, I can't remember. Polysotechnic League, I think was what it's called. Basically, there's a whole bunch of different books he wrote that were all in a kind of a shared universe. Paul Anderson kept very detailed notes on his worlds, on his characters, on the universe that he created, which was a science fiction, maybe bordering on science, like space opera kind of universe. And Polysotechnic League, sure, we'll call it that. But he had file cabinets full of all this information on worlds and characters and organizations in his world. And I admire that immensely. And I don't do that. I admire it, but I don't do it. I do recall one time I had an idea for a story that involved some elements of Roger Zelazny's The Chronicles of Amber, but set in kind of a space opera setting. This sort of grand, mysterious, super dysfunctional family of demigods who were living at the end of the universe. And I started taking little note cards and making notes about the characters and about the worlds and about the background, and also about the science of, basically the various theories about how the universe is going to end. And it became somewhat paralyzing. I ended up with all this material, and I used some of it in the Queen's Road. I'm hoping I can use more of it as that series progresses. But to write the original novel that I wanted to write, I kind of like, I had like this inertia, because I had gathered up all this information and it was almost like a wall. And I felt like I had to keep the faith with all of these little note cards that I wrote. So that project ended up getting shelved and only kind of came back to life recently when I started working on Queen's Road and realized I could work some of the stuff from that story into the into that series. So most of what my early fiction was all short stories. So I would just literally kind of write those by the seat of my pants. You have two types of people: pantsers or plotters. Plotters do outlines, they lay everything out. Pantsers just start writing. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. To be quite honest, pantsing, I wrote my first novel pantsing, and it was kind of like a train wreck. This novel has not seen publication. It's still around, but it's a freaking wreck. You might recognize little pieces of it, by the way, because they worked into other stories. That first novel actually is the first appearance of Jimmy Ossipile from Brotherhood of the Wheel. So anyways, I'm not saying pantsing or plotting is the way to go. I found a happy medium between the two. And I wanted to share that with you in sort of like the first part of this world building series. What I do is, when I was sitting down to write my first novel, I really had kind of concern, because one of the problems you can have with pantsing is you can wander off the reservation. You can wander to God knows where. and your chapters can end up being longer and a lot more meandering and incoherent than you want them to be. But I also knew myself well enough to know that I was not going to plot everything out and it was going to stay that way. So what I did as a way of sort of keeping me on focus, keeping me going in the right direction with what I was wanting to write, is I would write a brief summary of the chapter before I wrote it. And in that summary, I would include the characters I wanted to introduce and the general issues that I wanted to address in that particular chapter. Now, sometimes a summary is not how the chapter ended up. I think that's really important to point out. Just like I became sort of like the slave to all this research and all this kind of like plotting that I had done. I didn't want to do that. So what I did was basically my summaries were pretty short. Usually they were, maybe a page, not even a page sometimes a few paragraphs. Character X meets up with character Y. They have a discussion about this thing. And then character Z shows up suddenly and confronts both of them. There's my summary. Now, one thing I did do, and I'm not sure why I did this, but I think it helped me a great deal, and I still do it, is as I write a chapter summary, if a new character comes into that chapter, I go ahead and do like a whole character study on them. I give you their physical description. I give myself the physical description. I give myself their backstory, things that may not show up in the book at all, but will drive and motivate that character, even though, just like people, you don't know everyone's story when you meet them. And they may do certain things and you're like, why are you doing this? And it may have a reason, but you just don't know what it is. So I spent a lot of time on any new characters coming in so I could get like a handle on them. And that actually helped a lot. That's how Harry Pratt became Harry Pratt. Because originally I had him just being this kind of officious prick of a mayor, and he was not particularly that interesting. He was just there to kind of bluster and huff and puff. And for some reason, I decided to make Harry gay, and he was a gay Mormon, and that was kind of intriguing to me, and something that really gave the character a whole new direction, gave him depth. And so you can kind of like by kind of feeling these characters out, even characters you think are going to be minor can sometimes become major characters. That's what I do in mine, is I basically do a brief summary of what's going to happen in the chapter, and then I do a fairly detailed look at any new characters that are coming in. Now, I don't do this for every character, but sometimes you'll discover minor characters suddenly growing into something more than what you expected them to be. And that's always a good thing, because you read a book and it's like, oh, okay, this is this guy, this is the the bad guy with a heart of gold, or this is the streetwise, soul weary, character. And if you spend a little time with them, they can surprise you. They can become things that you didn't expect them to become. So one thing that I did want to kind of point out is that with the character synopses, I do not bind myself to that, because I am still kind of like a pantser at heart. So when I'm writing this chapter, I do try to say, okay, I said in my summary, I wanted these two characters to have a conversation, and it's a conversation about this thing. And I will, do my very best to put that in that chapter, because that's the reason that chapter is there. However, you can sometimes end up in a place where maybe character Z doesn't show up at the end of the chapter as you're writing. Maybe you figure it's better for character Z to be sitting in their car across the street and see characters A and B come out the door and decide to follow them to see what they're up to. Now, that's not what I had in my summary. That's right. It's not. That's why it's a very loose summary, because I don't feel hidebound to it. I know a lot of my writer friends, folks who are New York Times bestsellers, who write a lot of intellectual property type stuff. you have to do an outline. When I did Men in Black, when I did a short story for Men in Black, they said, we want you to do like a little original short story based off the characters in the movie, but it's going to be your own thing. I had to do an outline for that. I had to do a summary, and basically some people will break down their outlines literally chapter by chapter, scene by scene in the chapter. And bravo, kudos for you if you have that kind of discipline. I do not, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know that different people write different ways, and you need to find your comfort zone, find what works for you. Some of the folks you write for, especially if you're writing for something like DC Comics or Marvel Comics or Star Trek or Halo or Aliens, or I'm trying to think of some other franchises, but basically those folks, they're corporate and they want an outline. They're going to want to know exactly what's going on in this story, the beginning, the middle, and the end. They want to be able to look at your story and go, oh, this is this part here in the outline or the summary, however you want to put it. They are two different things, but some folks will, if you give them a summary that basically breaks down the whole story for you, everything that's going to happen in the story, they're usually happy with that. Some folks would prefer an outline, and outlines to me are a little more technical. The formatting is a little more rigid to me, and I don't feel as comfortable with that. But if your client wants you to do it, you better get comfortable with it. So that's how it happens. And then I write the chapter, and like I said, a lot of times the chapter doesn't come out the same as the summary, and that's okay. There are things that I've written about characters as far back as Six Gun Tarot that still haven't been revealed in the books that are in those character summaries. And you go back and look at them years later and you're like, wow, I never did anything with this. Or I only mentioned this in like one sentence in one book. And that's okay. I mean, these things, you want your characters to develop organically. Your characters are the bedrock of your world. You could have the most amazing fucking stage setting for these characters to be in, but if the characters seem flat or unoriginal or just boring, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you look at something like, say, Ringworld, Larry Niven's Ringworld, I love that book. I remember reading it in high school and being very excited about it. And one of the things that's in there is he has this amazing world that he has created, very unique world at that time. And his characters are still very dynamic and very interesting. He doesn't just rely on, wow, gee whiz, look at this neato science thing to carry the book along. Characters do the heavy lifting. And a lot of, the more science fiction I read from like the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 60s it started to kind of morph a little bit, but a lot of it was, hey, here's this concept. Here's a whole novel about an artificial man. And the characters were really boring, and they were not that interesting. They didn't have anything in their backstory for the most part, and they all talked real chummy to each other, I could see them kind of like, punching each other on the shoulder and smoking on their pipe while they did that. And for the time, that was okay. People read those books and got something out of them. But I am a firm believer that the only reason that I have ever gotten, my fiction out there is because of my characters. So when you start world building, your first step is get to know these people, get to know about them. Don't make them perfect. Don't make them able to do everything. Don't make them infallible. Actually, my suggestion would be do just the opposite. Make them human. Make them a big rumbling, mumbling pile of contradictions, and then do everything you can to try to make the reader sympathetic, not just sympathetic, but just engaged. The main character in the Nightwise books is an asshole. And to be honest, that I believe that has been one of the reasons those books have not, a lot of people love those books. But some folks who like critics and things like that, I got blasted for for the character. He's an unlikable, misogynistic, egotistical asshole. That's exactly what I wanted him to be, and it was hard. I mean, after writing Latham Ballard, I ran immediately to write Jimmy Ossipile because I wanted to show both sides of the human condition. And Jimmy has his issues too. They're just different from Latham's. But they're both characters that you would never mistake for each other. They're both characters who respond to stimulus in entirely different ways. And while Nightwise, got dinged, and I've gotten some bad reviews, and actually I got this horrible review from a reader that I actually had my dear friends David and Susie put it on a t-shirt for me. It was like a 1-star review, do not recommend. And it's just I'll read it to you sometime if I haven't already read it to you. I'm trying to remember if I've ever brought that up before or not, but it's my favorite shirt in the world. It's got a little hole in it now. I need to try to see if I can get another copy of it or something, but I love that shirt because the person just hated my book and hated my characters so much. And that means I'm probably doing something right. Maybe. I don't know. All right. Well, this has already gone on way fucking longer than I intended it to. So, world building. Before you sit down to start writing your chapters, I would recommend you create some kind of a little summary of what you want to accomplish in those chapters. And I think it does you well. And you can do it as a separate thing. You can have like a whole little separate, file for your characters. But I really do think before you start bringing characters in, including your main characters, do a character study on them. What's their favorite color? How did they end up? Why do they chain smoke? Why do they do this? Why do they do that? Why are they a fitness nut? What's their favorite author? What's their favorite drink? Are their parents alive or dead? And for God's sakes, not everyone's family has to be obliterated so they can be edgy. You can still be edgy and maybe have someone alive. Maybe the next book I'm doing later, I'm actually starting to think I want to do something else with Latham in the next book. But one of the things I was thinking about for the next book is Latham's mother. Don't tell anybody this. Latham's mother is alive, and he goes back to his hometown on a case and ends up running into his mother, and that relationship gets addressed, and that brings a whole new dynamic to that character. So anyways, basement of your world, your characters. Then you start building everything around them once you get to know these people, and they will grow as they interact with your world. And we'll talk more about that on the next video because I have talked too fucking long. Thank you guys. Look forward to talking to you again soon on the next video. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. We hit 200. We are over 200 subscriptions right now. Thank you. And I might do like a live chat with you guys on here. I'll see if I can schedule that and do a live chat to celebrate hitting 200. I want to keep going. If you like these videos, if you think they are of some value, please share them. Maybe refer to a friend to them, because I really do want to keep growing the channel. I love doing this so much, and I'm very thankful to you guys for giving me the opportunity to do it. And with that, I will see you guys on the next video. I hope everyone is having a great month, and we'll do another world building video real soon. Bye.